Welcome to Medical Intuitively Speaking. I'm Kim Louise, medical intuitive and holistic nutritionist. Join me on a journey to discuss all things medical intuition, metaphysics, nutrition, and energy healing. I'm so happy you're here. Let's get this started. Well, hello and welcome. I'm so excited to have as a guest on the show today my favorite astrologer, Debra Anne Clement. She's an accomplished professional astrologer of 25 years who consults and teaches, and she's an amazing psychic medium. I've had the great pleasure of having a very thorough astrological reading from Debra, as well as a psychic mediumship reading. Both readings were incredibly accurate and very life-changing. The astrology reading that I had with Debra validated and clarified so much for me regarding my medical, intuitive, psychic, and mediumship abilities, my relationships, finances, and work. And she gave some super helpful projections about my future. So, Debra, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here.
Thanks, Kim. I'm excited to be here.
Well, good. So, I wanted to ask you first, what was the defining moment when you first realized that you had an interest in astrology, and describe how you went about learning it?
Okay, so I was 16. Mm-hmm. I read Linda Goodman's Sun Sign book, and that was it. It was honestly, I joke and say I was hooked, but I just took to it. And so I started looking for other books, quite frankly, because, back in the day, there weren't, we didn't have the internet and all that. You used to go in a bookstore and look in the occult section to find some new books. And, for astrology charts at that time, you'd send away and pay to get a chart calculated. And that's really how I started to learn astrology. And the more I learned, the more I read, I practiced a lot. And I will say that to anybody, that is the key. And so as I studied, it was just, to say it was a passion, I'm going to say it's a calling. It was a calling for me. Yeah. And I felt comfortable with it. And the more I did it over the years, I felt as if at times, it sounds crazy, but it wasn't just that I was learning, but I also felt I was remembering.
Oh, that is fascinating. Fascinating. What is your personal approach to astrology?
Okay, so I look at astrology, and I look at, in particular, when you look at the horoscope wheel, I think it's much more than the roadmap, because we'll say it's the roadmap. I really say it's a shortcut to the soul. I truly believe that horoscope, before we are born, before we incarnate, everything we intend to do, relationships that, really we intend to form, experiences we're going to have, traits we want to use. It's chosen, and it is all, let's say, memorialized in that horoscope, and it's here in our lifetime. So we can go there, we can access the guidance that's in it. Now, fate versus free will, because I just want to mention that, because I do believe there are certain events or meetings in our lives that are fated. The soul agreed to it. I don't think there's that many of them, to be honest. But the reality of it is that even if something is fated, how we react to it, that's free will. And that's why we're here. We're here to exercise our free will, hopefully to learn some lessons, to, eventually get them right. And the planets in the heavens, when we talk about transits, right, or we talk about, projecting the future, I do believe that the planets, especially Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, when they activate the horoscope, that's the timing. They're triggering, this is the time maybe the meeting might occur.
I got you. I love this topic. Explain how astrology can be helpful for people.
Oh my God. Well, for thousands of years, people have looked to the stars for guidance, right? And we still
Uh-huh.
are.
Mhm.
And I think number one, validation.
Mhm.
Validation to me have to sit with a stranger who knows nothing about you, right?
Mhm.
And you hear things that validate your life experience. I think that is life changing. In fact, I know it's life changing for some people because it's
Oh
that
yeah.
thought of, my God, I'm not crazy, right? I'm not
Right.
crazy. And also, it gives meaning because very often in life, we have patterns. We have struggles, we all have our stuff. And through astrology, it'll identify a pattern and understanding that, okay, it's there. Maybe I chose to work on this and I have the potential to master it, to change it. I just think, it doesn't get much better than that. I mean, honestly.
I agree. I agree. I mean, the reading I had from you was completely life changing.
And the forecasting, I just want to say, because
Hmm.
when we look ahead,
Hmm.
it's never about telling somebody this is what you should do or
Hmm.
saying this is right. But it is the guidance of being able just to know a bit of, okay, you know what, I'm coming into some really good energy. Let me make the most of it. Or if there are some challenging times coming up. And that's when some ways I think that's the most important side of the forecasting,
Hmm.
that when a challenge is coming up, if you know it's coming or you have some inkling that it's coming, getting insight into how to best work with that energy, again, it can really make all the difference, between, getting through it or, getting through it miserably.
Right. Exactly. And so are there any common patterns or life lessons that you frequently see in the horoscope?
Oh, yeah. So I will say most people come into this life to learn something about relationships. For some people, it's family relationships, but usually
Hmm.
it's relationships. One common pattern is being attracted. Again, I'm going to say being attracted to somebody or to partners. They're there, but they're not there. They're just not there. And after a while, it's sort of like, who is this person? They're not there for me. The other pattern, over accommodating people who just, they're givers. They're givers. They constantly give. They tend to attract a lot of narcissists, to be
Hmm.
frank, but
Hmm.
they're always giving. And that's another pattern that you'll see. And it has to be worked out. And very often with that pattern, I'm just going to say, when people really have this desire, they get a satisfaction. They get satisfaction from helping others, from serving others, from giving. And that's really a wonderful thing. And for them, the lesson is to learn to do it in the proper way. And that's a need that needs to be fulfilled. And they need to find not necessarily a profession, but it could be, a calling or, volunteering, something to fill that need. And usually once they do, they stop attracting the people who come into the life who just really drain them.
Right. I remember you telling me that during the reading I had with you, and I thought I knew a lot, but I had never heard that before, and it made so much sense. And and it really did. It really changed up uh, how how I approached my my career, and then it changed up some of my relationships as well. So it was really helpful.
That was one of my big life lessons. And that's why
Hmm.
once I got it, and I mean, it took a lot of years, but once I got it, I saw it, and I've always continued when I see that pattern because it was one of
Right.
mine, and I
Hmm.
and I pass that on because
Hmm.
it is absolutely, you live such a better life, such a more balanced life, and overall
Uh-huh.
a more productive life, right? And of course, a happier one.
Exactly. So here's such a great one. I'd love for you to explain Chiron and the lunar nodes.
Okay, so the short version, all right, is in
Hmm.
astrology. Chiron is an asteroid and considered one of the asteroids, and represents. He's known as the wounded healer, and so it represents a wound of sorts. Everyone's born with Chiron somewhere in the chart,
Hmm.
in a sign, in what we call a house or a life area, and so we all have to sort of deal with this wound. thing about Chiron is that there's also a gift, because in mythology, yes, he was the wounded healer, but he was, Chiron was a centaur. He taught all of the great heroes, in Greek mythology. And of course, he could heal everyone. Due to circumstances, unfortunately, he couldn't heal himself. And so Chiron really is about, I don't want to say it's your weak spot, but it is a wound, usually starts sort of in childhood. And so I'm just going to say if someone has Chiron in Aquarius, let's say Chiron in Aquarius, there may be a bit of wounded acceptance. They grew up, they didn't feel like they fit in anywhere. It just might be something, when I say as simple as that, but there's circumstances to it. And so the thing about Chiron is that there's a wound, but there's also that gift. And that's what really needs to be focused on, because it is usually something that's a little easier for us to do for other people than ourselves. Kind of like giving advice, right? It's easy to look at other people's problems and sort of get to the heart of the matter than doing it for ourselves. But through dealing with that and helping others, healing others, we actually do heal ourselves. And the lunar nodes, one of my favorites, things to focus on, they're points in space. And the south node represents, I'll say, your soul's resume before you came in, before you were born. What has your soul experienced? What has it mastered? What lessons, quite frankly, sometimes are in progress, right? And so what's comfortable to you? What comes easily? Very often our gifts, our talents, they've been developed over lifetimes. But the north node, that is where we are evolving to during this lifetime. And that's uncharted territory, or at least it's not very familiar, for the soul. And so most of us resist our north node. My personal experience is I feel, when do people really start to wake up to the north node and sort of feel, this is where I'm supposed to be going, or this is something I'm supposed to be doing? Honestly, I'm going to say 45 is the average age. Anyone before that, I think it's, great. But 45 and over is when we start gravitating towards that north node. And I really believe part of the reason is we have to experience things, right? We have to have all these experiences before we have the maturity and maybe the readiness to go in that direction. And maybe sometimes a little bit of, guts.
Yeah, that totally describes what happened to me. I was around that age, right, when I started to really head towards my north node. So that makes total sense to me. So do the different types of intuitive gifts, such as being an empath, an energy healer, medical intuitive, psychic, or medium, show up in the horoscope?
Oh, everything and everyone can be found in the horoscope if you know where to look. Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. What you will find is that with healers, okay, people, energy healing, let's say energy healers, very often you will see a strong connection. It could be Neptune, it could be Pluto. It's what we call the eighth house in astrology. Mediumship, Neptune, of course, is known, right? It's very, it's certainly intuitive. It's a psychic planet. And so Neptune is usually prominent somewhere in the charts of your psychic mediums. But I will tell you, Mercury, and it's often overlooked. We talk about Neptune and intuition and the moon intuition, but that Mercury is always connected, because Mercury represents the mind, it's the communicator, it's the transmitter. And so a prominent Mercury, especially connected to certain parts of the chart. And there's so many variations, and it can show up in so many different ways. But it is that intuition on the one hand, or psychic ability, and you've got the communications. And when you're talking about your energy healing, the mind is still, that Mercury is usually strongly connected as well.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm just going to say one thing I've also noted over the years, and I see this very often, when the planet Jupiter is retrograde, so it appears to be moving backwards in the heavens, and it's retrograde in someone's chart. So, traditionally Jupiter retrograde is associated with maybe a bit of a late bloomer, or difficulty expanding. I have to tell you, I see Jupiter retrograde and I see buried treasure. Because I know in that person's life, especially, I'm telling you, there's life before 40, life after 40 with Jupiter retrograde. They can be successful. It's not that they're not, but somewhere around that 40-year mark, things just start to really blossom.
Oh, so fascinating to me. And then do health issues show up in the horoscope?
So potential health issues do show up, in the horoscope. And certainly I'm going to say medical astrology is really a specialty. And you have, so some people are very devoted to it. And so I do work with medical astrology. If I do a reading, I do look for potential health issues. Thing is, and this is the key word, it's potential. It may or may not manifest. And sometimes there may be potential in the chart, for issues connected, let's say, to sugar, to insulin, to, hypoglycemia. You can see potential. And depending on how the person lives their life, maybe their diet, right? For example, if it's blood pressure, their stress levels, how they manage their stress levels, that's going to play a role as to whether it manifests or not.
Right. And then do you think that certain manifesting techniques like the law of attraction or dowsing with a pendulum to change energies, do you think that those can alter astrological influences?
I think it's the other way around. The astrological influences can certainly strengthen the manifesting techniques. Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, so the other way around. Okay.
Because think about it. When we're working, right, we're working with the law of attraction, and certainly of course, obviously we want to attract and we want to manifest. Well, we have these different cycles. And if you're under a certain, I'm just going to say a Jupiter cycle, which is about abundance and opportunity, and it's a strong cycle, those techniques are definitely going to, say you get a little bit more bang for your buck, but it can absolutely enhance them.
So for instance, if Jupiter was in some beneficial place astrologically, and you chose to do some law of attraction technique, you're saying that could actually help with that, right? Because Jupiter is the most.
Yeah, we kind of look at Jupiter as Santa Claus, though. Sometimes Jupiter is also known for exaggeration, so you got to remember that.
Okay.
But Jupiter is about. Really, Jupiter rules luck, and the luck usually comes from opportunities. And so if someone wants to manifest a partner, right? I want a partner. And Jupiter happens to be activating a person's horoscope. The romantic section of their horoscope or the marriage sector is going on at the same time. You've got that energy working for you as well.
I love this. Okay. So if a person is going to read about their general monthly horoscope, do you suggest that they pay most attention to their rising sign, sun sign, or moon sign, and why?
Okay. So very often you read your sun sign, and if you know your rising sign, read that as well. And so I generally tell people, read your sun sign first. If we're talking, your general horoscope, right, for everyone, to start with the sun sign. The rising sign, if you know your rising sign, all right, it can actually be, and I say more accurate, but it can be. The issue is that the horoscope is divided, and it depends on how it's calculated.
Right.
So, if I'm saying, and I'm just going to say, if Aries is a rising sign, just for example, okay, let's say Aries is rising, and say, read your rising sign to see where Saturn is, and you'd say, and I'm just going to say Saturn is in Aquarius. And so we say, okay, Saturn is in the 11th house. Well, it might be for you, but depending on your chart and where each house, okay, which rules the different life areas, depending on what degree it starts and ends, the planet could be in a different house. So it really does depend. It doesn't hurt to read them both. I mean, quite frankly, the moon sign, I'll say no right off the bat, but it doesn't really hurt, but the rising sign, we're talking about a time of birth, right? We need that time of birth to get that accurate rising sign. But see, I will say that if someone does not know their time of birth, and there's no way to really figure it out, creating a chart with the sun on the ascendant is what I'm going to say, making the sun sign the rising sign,
Mm-hmm.
is actually a very good technique. So if I don't have a birth time and I had to really work with something, that's what I would do. And that's pretty much how your general horoscopes are created.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Whatever the sun sign is. So your Gemini, it's written as if Gemini, is rising and is the first house.
I gotcha. But the most accurate thing to do is to get an actual reading based on their own chart. That's going to give them a lot more accuracy.
And you need a time of birth.
Gotcha. Okay. So I know that it took you some years for you to embrace your psychic mediumship abilities, but explain your path to getting there.
Yeah, it was a long one. It was certainly a long one. So I was very, I guess now I would say, I was very psychic as a child. I had experiences from the time I was very young, and I say otherworldly experiences. And it wasn't like, my great grandmother came to visit me. I had terrifying experiences just as a child. And, I'd feel things grab at me. And, being a child, and my parents honestly were, especially my mom, was very open-minded, but they really pretty much attributed it thinking that I must have snuck in and watched The Twilight Zone or The Outer Limits or something, to that, right, to a big imagination. And so when I became interested in astrology, that was so comfortable and so easy. And I was fascinated by the intuitive world and the psychic world and the other side. But at the same time, I was also still fearful of it because I was afraid, oh my God, these experiences will continue. And they were on and off throughout my life. And quite frankly, I had them through my early 40s. It wasn't a constant thing, but I did, still have it. And of course, I wasn't aware of, how open maybe I was, that I wasn't really grounded and I really wasn't, I had to use the word protected because we are protected, but I certainly wasn't grounded well enough. And so little by little, and this will go, I'm going to speak to the North Node here, because as I got older and I started, just being drawn to it more, and my North Node is in Scorpio. And it's connected to Neptune. And when I looked at my whole chart, throughout the years, I would think, I'm supposed to go in this direction. And I resisted it. I absolutely resisted it. And then little by little, I took some courses and I went to a workshop. It was in 2009. I went to a workshop with Lisa Williams. And so I sort of would dip my toe in it and think, I want to go here. And then it was like I'd get cold feet. It was just, I didn't want to do it. And then I'll tell what happened was in 2013, I started seeing things again. I started hearing things. They weren't frightening. All of a sudden I was seeing things and they weren't frightening. And I was seeing beautiful things. And I was starting to get messages. And I thought wow, but I wasn't thinking, I'm going to do this professionally. I just thought, I wondered, why is it happening now? And I do remember actually looking at my chart, and an eclipse had just hit my, it was a lunar eclipse, brings things to light, had hit my North Node. And I thought, okay, so maybe I'm opening up. But again, still didn't feel comfortable, like I wanted to go in that direction or that I should. And the turning point for me was I was giving an astrology reading. And I had a young client, and I think she was about 21. And at the end of the reading, I always say, do you have any questions? And she said, yeah. She said, I don't know if you do this kind of work, but could you connect with my father? And I have to tell you, at any other time, I would have said, no, I don't. And I would have, referred her or given her some names. And something, inside me, and I went with it. And I said to her, okay, well, let's see. And I'd be quite frank, I had no idea really what I was doing, but I just took this breath and I thought, let me see what comes. And I just described, and I saw in my mind's eye, I saw this gentleman and I described it. And I remember thinking, and he was an elderly gentleman. Okay. He was, and I say elderly, he was in his 70s, but I thought, okay, maybe I'm seeing her grandfather or something. And I described this gentleman, and then she starts crying. because it was her dad who was at an, past middle age when she was born. And so I did this reading for her. And when we hung up, I knew I was a medium, and I thought, this is where I'm supposed to go. But I knew I needed training. I knew I needed a teacher. And so I did do a mentorship with Lisa Williams, 1-to-1. And then I did her program for certification, and I worked with one of her master teachers, Heidi Jaffe. So I did a lot of training. I've done some training since then with Lisa. She's wonderful. And that's really how it started. And then eventually, you take a breath, and after a lot of practice readings, I sort of added that as a service.
Yeah, I mean, the reading you gave for me, it was so wonderful. It was so wonderful. So do you have any advice for finding a teacher, or even advice for someone for them to develop their abilities on their own?
Yeah, so for finding a teacher, I will say this. I think it's important. It's a connection. I just feel like you know, and if your recommendations are always the best, right? Like for anything. And I will say to anyone, if you're interested in looking for a teacher, because you can Google, and there's all types of courses and teachers. If they have anything out there on YouTube, watch it, because that's going to give you a very good sense of their personality, and quite frankly, whether you connect or not. And that's just something that's really important. And the other thing is, quite frankly, go onto Google, put their name in, and whatever, psychic teacher so and so scams, psychic teacher so and so complaints, and from the because it is what it is out there, really. And to put that out, because the practicing, there's so much information out there, and some of it's really good, some of it's not so good. But you can always just, there's a lot of books. There's a lot of exercises that people can do on their own. And again, just really developing their own intuitive gifts. I've taught an introductory class, for psychic mediumship. And I think the hardest thing, or challenge, I should say, for a lot of people is they don't have somebody to practice with.
Right.
There are a lot of people out there who cannot, they can't talk about these topics with people. So when they can get involved in a group, or in a class, it really makes a tremendous difference. And so that's why there are a lot of exercises that people can do and practice, and just practice on their own to develop some of the, to develop the skills.
Right. I do. I also want people to know that in Facebook, there's a lot of groups there that you can find people to practice with. And then there's a lot of mediumship circles.
You can find them on Facebook as well.
Yeah, that I found to be really helpful. You want to find the right mediumship circle for you.
It comes down, it's a little bit of, I don't want to say trial and error. You might hit it right the first time. And, and I've been in some of those groups. And what's nice is, listen, you get a supportive group. It's just a wonderful thing.
Right. I agree with you. So describe your astrology mentoring program. How does someone qualify for it, sign up for it with you, and when does it begin?
So it's actually, level 1 is actually starting on April 3rd. And this is the second time I'm running this program. And I have to say, I started it, it's a little bit, I guess you can kind of call it legacy work in a way, but I wanted to train. I do love teaching, and I did want to train astrologers in my method. And one of the reasons being, I have picked up so many clients in the past few years, honestly, whose astrologers have either passed or have retired. And, look, eventually I'm not going to be here forever. And I thought, I'd like my clients to have, Debra's not doing it, or Debra's on the other side. So here's, her recommendations. And so I decided to train. And so I have my first group of certified astrologers as well. And I work with them, and I'm helping to promote them. And so there are 3 levels to the program, though I will say they can be taken individually. And level 1 is starting, and it's what I call the foundation. It's really how to interpret the natal chart, because you have to master that before you can do anything else. And I always say at the end of 12 weeks, you will be able to accurately interpret a natal chart. You will have all the tools. And to really get a lot of details or information about the program, people can just go to my website, debraanneclement.com, and it's Debra, Debra, clementastrologer.com, and click on classes. And I've got the program, completely, pretty much laid out there. But the first level is natal astrology. People want to continue and want to learn predictive astrology from me. That's the second level. Third level is really, it's advanced, it's advanced practice. And I'd say a good part of that is devoted to relationship astrology. But I also cover vocational, money, a little bit of medical. And if anyone does complete, decides to go forward, complete all three levels successfully, they have an option for certification. And I test them. It's practical. They have to read 3 people. I pick them. They get evaluated. I have like a 3-page evaluation form, and I listen. I sit and listen to a recording. I listen to every word of every reading. And but I have to be honest, it's a wonderful program. I will say there's nothing like it out there in the sense that it's a mentoring program. There's a lot of individual attention. It's not tutoring. I'm not going to call it that, but it's mentoring. So that it's everyone, not everyone's at the same level. So I've had people who've taken the course who are out there practicing and wanted to really sharpen their skills. I've had people who are pretty much beginners who come in. And, and it's worked out very well. It was a wonderful experience. I absolutely loved it. So I'm excited to start it again.
I'm excited for you. Debra, is the other, the term for relationship astrology, is that synastry?
So relationship astrology, what they call the synastry, that's a chart comparison. That's when we look at your chart and somebody else's, and we see, how do your planets interact with the other person's chart? Right. And there's another level of relationship astrology where you can combine or merge, and there's 2 different methods to do it, to merge the charts into one chart, into a composite chart. And that reflects the relationship, we say, as a single entity. You're going to live with somebody, that chart is going to show, because the reality is, when we're dating somebody and, we may go away for a weekend or a week, but it's very different than living with somebody every day. And so that composite chart shows when you really have that relationship, I hate to say what comes out. Some things may be better, and maybe some things there might be a little bit more conflict. And this way you can look at it and see that.
Gotcha. So I know that you also recently just ended a class called Developing Your Spiritual Gifts, right?
Right.
And then do you have any new classes coming up for that?
Probably towards the end of the year. I'm going to say that, I shouldn't say this summer. I probably would announce it in the summer. And really, to find out about the classes, I do recommend people sign up for my newsletter. It comes every week. And the reason is because when I do have a class or I have an event, I've really been fortunate. I just send it to my newsletter list. And it pretty much it sells out, it fills up. So that's why you don't really see everything all over the place, like with advertising and things. And so anything, first announcement, first dibs, I'll put it that way, goes to my subscribers.
Gotcha. Now, I know you gave your astrology website information. That was debraanneclement.com, but also you've got a separate website for your psychic mediumship readings. That is dacmedium.com, right? So D is in Debra, A is in Anne, C is in Clement, medium.com. And then Debra, you have some fantastic podcasts of your own. One of them, the one that completely got me hooked on you, was your podcast called Shortcut to the Soul Astrology Podcast. So I want to
Yeah, that's still out there, and I am hoping shortly to get back to that, to get back to the podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There are many episodes. I mean, honestly, I listen to them over and over again. I learn every time. I am not kidding you. I just love that podcast. You also have another one with Chris Flisher called He Says, She Says Astrology podcast too, right? That's still out there.
It's still out there. I don't know for how long, because Chris recently passed away.
Right.
And so but I was able to work with him. I worked with Chris, since 2008, when I launched a internet radio show anchored in astrology. And he had Turning of the Wheel. We were on the same network. And and it was really the beginning of a wonderful, relationship and, and friendship. But that was a live show. And I will say that I do miss live shows. I really enjoy them. I used to take live calls and do on-the-spot readings. And I mean, I was terrified to do my first show. I mean, I still remember that. I was terrified to take calls. I don't know how many shows I had before I would take a call from someone. But I love live events. You never know what's going to happen. You never know what you're going to be asked. But I enjoy that. I enjoy that.
Right. Oh, I would imagine that would be a little scary. So I'm going to go ahead and include all of your contact information in the show notes. And Debra, I really want to thank you for joining me on the show today. And I want to thank everyone for listening. And I wish you all the very best in hell. Take care.